think is this verification and cooperation mechanism, and
which the scrutiny mechanism.
Yeah, on justice and home affairs. Do you think it will really put the pressure for the Romanian government to continue reforms? Because so far it doesn't.
Well, I would hope so. Ask Ulrén, who's outside. I mean, he can judge it better than I do. But I hope it certainly does, because otherwise it's going to be to the sort of detriment of also the future enlargement process. Because otherwise people are going to come back and say, well, they didn't really live up to the promises they made. And the extra instruments that we put in place, because these instruments are instruments we've never used before, the ones we do now with Bulgaria and Romania, they didn't do the trick. And accordingly, then there might be people that say the European Parliament, I just use them as a pretext for the reasoning, to say that, well, we have to go slower on enlargement. So I think it's very important, both for Bulgaria and Romania themselves, needed to say, but also for the future of the enlargement process, that it is observed and works.
Just a little more, another question. Is there danger for the European Union itself if you don't have a functioning rule of law in two of the member states?
The European Union is a union built on the rule of the law. I mean, if I were to say one thing that is really the core of the European Union is the rule of the law. And the fact that we have now extended, we are, or at least on paper, we are the largest area in the world covered by the rule of the law and a uniform set of safeguarding human rights, for example. And then it is critically important that that rule of the law really works, that the institutions and the mechanisms are in place in all of the member countries. That being said, sometimes it takes some time to get up to the standards, but it is absolutely imperative to get up to the standards, because this is the very core. I mean, the economic integration doesn't work without the rule of the law. Democracy doesn't work without the rule of the law. The respect for the Brussels decisions, be that Council or be that Parliament, doesn't work without the rule of the law. So it is at the core of everything.
Paul Taylor from Reuters. Another candidate country, another question about the rule of law. Turkish prosecutor wants to close down the ruling party and disqualify the Prime Minister and the President from politics for 5 years. How does that square with the rule of law in your view? And what does it say about Turkey's suitability for EU membership? Well,
we all have in our respective countries sometimes prosecutors that use somewhat bizarre elements of our respective legal frameworks. But this takes the concept of bizarre application of laws to astronomical heights, I would say. Really, I mean, it is. I mean, democracy is there. AK Party is a solidly democratic party that is pursuing a solidly European reform agenda. And that should be respected. And we know that there are those who are trying to break things down, or who have, I think, extremely exaggerated, extremely inflated fears for the future of the secular character of Turkish society. We don't see those fears. We don't see the reasons for it. And they are evidently prepared to use even the most bizarre instruments because of that. But it is bizarre in the extreme.
In the back.
Ukrainian Union News Agency, Mr. Minister, you have started probably 1 month ago a new dialogue between Baltic countries in the large sense of this word and Ukraine. What concrete steps could be done in the nearest future within the framework of this dialogue? And more concretely, do you expect Ukraine join one day Baltic Sea Convention, Helsinki Convention, I mean?
The latter question I'm not quite certain of, because a lot of that we are doing in the Baltic area at the moment is concentrated on environmental issues and preservation of the Baltic Sea. So it's more sort of concerned with those that are the coastal states, so to say, and Ukraine is not in that particular category. But it's true. I mean, we had a very good meeting here in Brussels with the Foreign Minister of Ukraine and the Nordic and the Baltic foreign ministers and the foreign minister of Poland as well, where we had a very free discussion on the prospects and the road ahead. And we will also have Prime Minister Tymoshenko coming to Stockholm in early May to continue those discussions. there's now a good basis in the sense that Ukraine has been admitted to the WTO. That's extremely important. That means that we can move forward with this sort of deep free trade agreement, which is the core of what is called the enhanced agreement. But the deep free trade is very important. We've never done it before with anyone. I think it brings the prospects of very real integration of the economies with substantial economic benefits to both sides. And it will be dependent, of course, upon the rule of the law in Ukraine, and will then pave the way for the further steps that are there. And I do think, and I do hope, I think I mentioned in that we will find new ways of expressing also the support for the European perspective of Ukraine during this year.
In the front, yeah.
Alexander Betic from the Tanjug News Agency. Another question on the rule of law, and it's concerning Kosovo. Could you share with us some of your ideas about assessment of the rule of law situation in Kosovo, and particularly the prospects of the EULEX mission deployment? You have given to some media some details about your views about how you believe that UNMIC should stay for some period of time in northern Kosovo. Could you elaborate a little bit?
No, that's not been related to northern Kosovo. But as concerns Kosovo, what I would recommend reading is the assessment that the European Commission made in whatever it was in November. I think it was 6th of November. It published its sort of annual review of different candidate countries as well as areas. And if you read the assessment there of Kosovo, it makes for, I mean, let's be honest, it makes for rather grim reading in terms of the state of the rule of law and administrative and legal capabilities. So we face a rather daunting task in building a functioning rule of the law and state institutions in Kosovo. And that's also why the EULEX mission is important. The EULEX mission is there to build the rule of the law for each and every one that is there in Kosovo. And that's going to take, even if it's an initial 2-year period, I would envision that will take quite some time. And that is also the precondition for the economic takeoff that I think is necessary. Then I've said that when we go back somewhat more than a year in time, when President Ahtisaari presented, I think it was in February, his plan for a settlement. We are still working on that one, or we are working on it, but we don't have a settlement. That was based on there being either an agreement or a resolution by the UN Security Council. That would have sorted out a number of problems that are not sorted out as things are now. And looking at the situation, I do see that there will be the need for continued UN role in certain areas that was not foreseen a year ago. I mean, just to take one concrete example. Kosovo will, of course, issue its passports. But those passports will be possible to use for travel to the countries that have recognized Kosovo. There will be, I don't know how many, but there will be countries that don't recognize Kosovo. And those Kosovo citizens who want to travel to those countries will have to travel on UNMIC travel documents. Accordingly, we do need a UN function there to issue travel documents for those kinds of persons, those kinds of journeys. That's one task. There could be other tasks where we will need the UN. For example, the international representation of Kosovo in certain places where it otherwise will not be possible due to the fact that we don't have a Security Council resolution and it's not recognized by everyone. And I do think there might be also functions during a transition period in terms of minority areas where the UN can fulfill a useful role in establishing links and communications between the different authorities. But this is, as you can hear, very much work in progress. This needs to be defined further.
Two questions. One from Paul.
Paul Goossens, Belgium News Agency. Still about Kosovo. In a Swedish non-paper of December, of your hand, I suppose, you had it about the international law and the necessity, about 1244, to respect the resemblance of the international law. Do you still believe it's impossible base ULEX on 1244. Do you still believe if ULEX comes in the place of UNMIC that you need a formal decision of the Secretary General to have the resemblance of respect of international law?
Well, EULEX is, if you look at the decisions of the Council of the EU, the EULEX mission is based on 1244. And that's the way it's important for the respective countries that are part of the EULEX operation, that there is a legal basis. That is 1244. And that's also been accepted by the Kosovo authorities. I mean, mind you that what was talked about and still talked about is a supervised independence. And EULEX is part of that supervision, as is the International Steering Group, as is the International Civilian Representative, and he has fairly extensive executive powers that he can use in Kosovo. And that's based, at the end of the day, on some sort of agreement that for most of us would have to find some basis back in 1244. So the continued validity of 1244 is not only a fact, because it is valid, it's also something that is useful when it comes to deploying these things. As to the interface between the EULEX and the UN and the different other organizations that are there, we heard about NATO. I mean, NATO said that its mission, or the Secretary said that NATO was crystal clear. Well, perhaps. These divisions between the different international organizations are not yet crystal clear, I would say. Still, I would use the word work in progress, adjusting it to the realities that are somewhat different from a year ago, and perhaps also taking into account the situation on the ground.
Last question.
Feyzullah Yarınbaş, Anatolian Agency, on Turkey again. Turkish Chief Prosecutor also asked the Constitutional Court to ban President Gül and Prime Minister Erdogan from politics. I think you know very well these two politicians. Do you think they are detrimental to secularism in Turkey?
It is detrimental to secularism in Turkey.
Secularism. They are detrimental to secularism in Turkey. Secularism of Turkey.
I mean, not that I can see. I mean, I consider them to be profound European reformers. And I think if you were to go around the councils of the capitals of Europe, you would find almost everyone echoing the same sentiments. I mean, these are impressive democratic reformers that want to take Europe on a European path, want to take Turkey on a European path, continuing the sort of democratic and the secular tradition that is there in Turkish society. If they happen to be religious, or if they happen to have wives that are religious, I mean, we have a tradition of Europe for respecting religions, and the fact that people are religious is not something that allows you to ban them from public office in any European country. That would be seen as even as a violation of human rights, I think.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.